It's so messy. Okay. It's not a smooth transition. It's kind of like, I don't know, like when you walk past a dressing room and you kind of see somebody like, dude, I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready. Are you ready? Everybody, welcome back to Pencil to Pencil, your favorite pandemic podcast, brought to you weekly at 8 p.m. EST by your expert cartoonist and co-host. I'll start. My name is JAMAR Nicholas, um, Philadelphia native, and also I have many nicknames. I'll give you one just to keep it moving. John Luke Picard. You see the Philly reference there? Engage. I am joined at the proverbial hip by my best bud and full bird colonel of comics, Michael Manley. Hello, Mike. And also our good bud and maestro of web comics, middle-aged Steve Conley. Hello, Steve Conley. How are you?
Hey, everybody. How you doing?
All right, Steve. What's tell us how you've been feeling the past couple of weeks, being the new co-host of Pencil to Pencil.
I like it. When we first talked about it, I was a little bit trepidatious. I was like, oh no. I felt like you have to be old enough to get the Northern Exposure reference. I thought Paul Provenza, like the idea that you bring in somebody. Oh, am I a curse? Am I going to bring this thing down? But it's been great. It's been great. Everyone's been lovely. And last week's conversation with Mark Schultz and Thomas Yates was fantastic. If people haven't checked it out, I hope they do. It's in the archives. I think it's available on both Facebook and YouTube.
Yes.
But that was fantastic. That was great. What a wonderful opportunity. So yeah, I'm stoked.
Oh, that's fantastic, and we're very fortunate to have you, sir. And also, let's check in with Mike. Mike, what are you sipping on tonight? Do you have an iced coffee recipe? Do you keep like old coffee from like the day before in the fridge, or how do you make your iced coffee?
I made this right before, so it's fresh.
I've been for some reason addicted to seltzer lately. Like,
are you turning into you're gonna have an egg cream?
I don't know, like I've tried to cut out a lot of stuff. Now that we're getting older, Mike. So I've tried to like not necessarily cut all sugars out, but I've sit on Coffee Break with JN a lot. I'm always quizzing people about the kind of things they keep in the refrigerator. Like, you have a pitcher of juice or some sort of liquid in your refrigerator. What is it? It could be like a Brita. It could be like, I don't know, Crystal Light iced tea or something.
In my refrigerator.
You don't have a pitcher or anything in there?
I just drink water, and then I make coffee. Sometimes I make iced tea. I don't have any pitchers of any. I don't buy any juice.
What? What about you, Steve? What's in your fridge? What do you sip on?
Coffee, soda, water. I try to drink more water. I in the last 2 years I've been trying to drink more water. I am getting younger, but it's not. But it's not from what I'm consuming. I don't think.
It's from the Lazarus pit that you found.
Sometimes I drink. Was it the Body Armor Light Mango?
Yo, those are good.
And I put that in a little bit of water, like a 50-50 water that.
Oh, you cut that?
I cut that with water, yeah.
Huh. That's interesting.
Aspiring cartoonists are writing these down.
That's right.
Almost all cartoonists I know drink coffee. That seemed to be the thing that everybody, because you're working. In the old days, everybody smoked.
Yeah, that's a real thing.
I don't know if I know any cartoonists that smoke now, though. I see pretend cartoonists pretending to smoke cigars to be macho.
Oh, is that a thing?
Yeah, the guys pretending to smoke cigars and be macho and drinking their whiskey.
Candy cigarettes.
Candy cigarettes.
Yeah. But, look. Jack Kirby got throat cancer, so don't be smoking damn cigarettes or smoking any cigars.
All right, let's talk about the elephant in the room before we get started. The elephant in the room is that, guys, tonight we're supposed to have our good bud John Gallagher on the show. John texted me at the 11th hour and said, "Sorry, guys, I can't make it. We're very sad, but all is not lost. You still have us."
Well, who needs John Gallagher?
Well, I do. He's great.
So we're going to have John back on.
Possibly be more important. Was he defusing a bomb over the Arctic?
He may have been. You know, he's a man of mystery.
Did he? Will he fall and freeze in a glacier until next week when he will thaw out?
So rather than just like upset the apple cart that we've just got back on the road, we're going to go and just kick it for you guys.
John Gallagher. Who's going to be pretending to be John Gallagher?
I think Steve could probably pull that off more than me.
Like a phone book to sit on or something.
Yeah, he's pretty tall. So we figured this would be a good time to kind of like kick the ball around, have the people who are watching us live ask us questions. And Steve had a lot of really good ideas about maybe taking this time to ask us questions, like things that maybe penciliers and friends of the show have always thought about but never really asked, because we had a boot camp session or we had a guest. And you can almost treat this like as an AMA.
Yeah.
Steve,
when did you stop drinking and beating your wife, Mike?
Well, how much time do you have?
Well, that's as someone who's been watching the show, long-time listener, I've had lots of questions about the projects you guys are working on, and I'm like, the focus is almost always on the guest, and Jamar was acting as a host in a way, as a lot of episodes, kind of like not only is he working the behind the scenes and the dashboard that runs the show, and doing all that stage managing, and I have so many questions for Jamar. Like, I mean, on the cusp of this release of this massive book, we've all released issue 1s of our comics, and it's like, okay, it's going to go into the comic stores. Who knows how many they ordered? Who knows who's going to read it?
Right.
But a Scholastic Graphics release of Leon the Extraordinary is
extraordinary.
There's just no word for it. Okay, it's extraordinary. So, so I was going to ask about the origins of Leon the Extraordinary. Like, how'd you come up with the idea for it? Where did it, how did it grow before it became the Scholastic thing? Where did it begin? Where did you imagine it was going to go? Was it going to be a web comic? Was it going to be a printed book? Was it going to be a graphic novel? Was it always meant to be pitched to agents? And what was your journey from the comics you were doing before Leon to Leon? Because there's a change of gears there.
Mm-hmm.
And
was there proto Leon before Leon? Like, little character that would appear, and then eventually you drew him more and more and more?
Well, those are all fantastic questions, and I will do my best to answer them. Thank you. And people are putting some things in the chat. Oh, Steve, do you have that banner?
I'm digging through the back end. I'm slow at this. I'm sorry.
Yes, my undiagnosed ADHD makes things look easy. So, not every.
I'm checking it now for typos. Okay, no, it seems okay.
So, for like long time people who follow my work, my first self-published comic was called the Jamar Chronicles, which was a story of me. It's very Rick and Morty before Rick and Morty was a thing. It was me jumping through dimensions, saving the world, that kind of stuff.
So you were your own character.
Yeah. And it was kind of like tied into a lot of my favorite loves, not necessarily time travel, but more like dimension hopping, which nobody was really doing yet. But that's kind of been done. It's been done now. And I was plotting out issues down the road. And in one of them, I had this idea of, in almost all of these worlds, Jamar would run into whoever the hero of that universe was. And they'd have some sort of like Marvel team up type of thing. So he winds up in this one dimension, and there's basically like a Robin without a Batman. So there's this little kid he finds who takes him back to his bat cave, and he's like, "Yo, look at all this stuff. Where's your mentor or whatever?" And it was kind of like some daddy issues. And he goes, "Well, yeah, he went out for a pack of Newports and he never came back. So I'm kind of stuck in this cave. Like I'm too young to drive. I can't drive the magnificent car. I just gotta, you know." So they go on this adventure, and I never did the issue, but that's where Leon came from.
So wait a minute, you plotted that out,
Mm-hmm.
but you stopped doing the Jamar Chronicles before you did that?
Yeah,
So Leon was the sidekick that didn't have a Batman.
yeah. So that's basically how the character came to be.
No, did you sketch him out?
Say it again, Mike.
How did you plot it out? Did you sketch it out? How did you?
There's a little bit of both. There's stuff in my sketchbooks that show, like it says Leon is like a little kid, it's really rough looking, and like a couple of scenarios with Jamar and him, like trying to pilot a helicopter or something weird like that. As my whole idea with that was, I always loved this, like the '66 Batman stuff, but it always seemed like, you know, how could you twist that or flip it on its head to have a ward who didn't have, you know, a Batman, and you know, what's the point of having all this stuff if you don't know how to use it? Like I was playing around with those little analogs.
What if that world's Batman was basically killed or something, and there was no Alfred, I take it.
Right. Yeah, it was just, you know, I think Batman lives in a studio apartment. It's just like there's nobody else, bro.
Another Bat trail mix.
Bat trail mix. You know, and then you know, I started kind of picking around with this whole kind of like I call it daddy issues. I think a lot of things stem from daddy issues, but kind of like that dynamic of, you know, like what happens if this person's not here? What path does the sidekick take? And I just kind of put that in my pocket for a while. And then a couple of years later, I can't remember which came first, Mike. It might have been I did a anthology 8-pager for, this is part of Gallagher. Gallagher asked me to be in this anthology, Even More Fun Comics, because I think there was a More Fun Comics before that. And Steve, maybe you were in one of those, right?
I was, yeah.
And that is, for you collectors out there, that's the first published Leon.
Wow.
But you were no longer doing Jamar Chronicles then.
Right.
So you never actually used that story.
No, I never used that story. That's like a behind the scenes thing. So the new Leon was, he was younger. He's younger than where he is now. He was in 3rd grade, and he was just trying to be a hero to his classmates, and he had a lisp. So like all of his dialogue was spelled out the long way. And I even got tired writing that out. I'm like, wait a minute, maybe I shouldn't do this. This is ridiculous.
So would you say it and then like try to figure out how you would say it with the lisp and then try to?
Yeah, like a lot of THs. Kind of how they mess with Mike Tyson, you know.
Right.
You know, where everything's a lot of THs. And the look wasn't there yet. But I was starting to just kind of play around with doing kids work, because off to the side I had done those a series of what do you call it, kind of gateway graphic novels for Tokyo Pop, the Gross Adventures.
Right. Yeah.
And Mike helped me on some of that. I think we did some really fun ink things together. And that kind of gave me the bug to do kids' books. I hadn't thought about it before that. So then our good buddy Scott Neely, who's one of the licensed Scooby-Doo artists, invited me and Mike to do a comic strip in this Delaware County magazine. which was a kind of like a penny saver magazine. You know, when you go to the supermarket and there's the basket with just like the magazine that has ads and maybe a story in it somewhere and coupons.
And put like a picture of Brad Pitt on the cover, so like people would go like, "Oh, I want Brad. I want to take that home."
Yeah, so Scott invited us to do a comic strip. Like he made a funnies page. So all three of us had a strip, and I started playing around with Leon there. So the one issue with that was that the thing only came out every month, and I was trying to do like a 4-panel strip. So it was like a really early play at just seeing how the universe worked.
Is there any place people could see those? Would you want people to see those?
I mean, you can. I think they might be online. I think.
Are they on your Patreon or something like that?
Oh yeah, that'd be a good idea. I could scan those. But I think Delaware County Magazine, or DCM, is still.
Are they even still in existence now?
I'm not sure. What was it? That might have been like to the early thousands. That might have been like 2004, 5,
something now. I don't even think they're. I don't even see that thing, because that was one of the things. You'd go to the diner, they'd have a pile. You go to the Acme, there'd be a pile everywhere you went. They were like at all your 7-Eleven, your Wawa. They would be like everywhere because it was free.
Right.
And yeah, I don't think they're around anymore.
Well, one of the cool things for me was it scratched the itch because I always wanted to do a newspaper strip. And it was kind of the closest thing that I was getting because it got me thinking in those avenues. Because when I was younger, I did a bunch of failed syndicate pitches that never went anywhere. But, people were really kind of reacting to Leon, and it made me kind of want to go further. And the first book, like the Protector of the Playground book, came out of Gallagher again, where my old virtual studio partners, John Gallagher and Rich Faber, when we were doing the Comic Book Diner podcast, if anybody remembers that back in the day, we did a really early Kickstarter just to kind of like circulate our own projects. And Leon was one of them. So that was the genesis of getting Leon out into the world. I hadn't thought about doing Leon in another aspect before that, but then after it came out and people really reacted to it strongly, I just ran it up the flagpole.
It looks so good. It's such a good package that I've got mine. I should have made it. I should have had it available. I wish I had props. I didn't do enough props.
The hardest thing about that was that what you really had to do was you had to do a strip, because I did the Creepertons. You had to do a strip that basically stood on its own. So there was because a month till you got the next one, if you ever saw the next one. So you had to do like one little standalone strip. So you did that, I did the Creepertons. And then we did that. What was it?
It was like a year or two.
The Mad Bomb. What was it? That big thick book that had everybody doing stories in it?
Was that Brain Bomb?
Brain Bomb, that was it.
Oh wow, I forgot about that. I don't think I was in Brain Bomb.
You were not in Brain Bomb? Okay, because I did a Creeperton story for Brain Bomb.
And I love the Creepertons. I always was bothering you about doing more Creeperton stuff.
I would actually like to do some more. I was thinking about that. I have like all these, like you have an idea, rattles around, it comes out. The reality is that in order to, like, you've been working now 10 years on Leon, right?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Right from your first idea, and you gotta keep going, and you develop it, and you work on it, and you through all the, you're refining it.
Yeah.
Right. And this is the graphic novel that's coming out now is even more refined than your first Kickstarter graphic novel, because you should tell people, about the process of like how you pitch it. And then it's not just like you walk in and go like, well, there's Leon. Oh, please sign, right?
Yeah.
They give feedback, and then you give them something, right? You talk about that give and take process.
Sure. So, in between all of that, I picked up a literary agent. So I think right after Fist Stick Knife Gun came out, I picked up a literary agent because, I found out after that project was over that I probably would have been better off if I had an agent when I walked into that project. So I picked one up, and so much time had passed between when we had started this Kickstarter project and when it came out. Like John and Rich's books came out, and mine took a lot longer because I kind of agreed to it, but I hadn't really put the project together. You know what I'm saying? There was a lot of really just like loose ideas, on those game shows where they put the person in a tube with the money flying around.
I always imagined it was like a Little Rascals thing. Like they go, "Come on, everybody, let's put on a show." Yeah, you're on, Jamar. What?
What? Wait, what?
Well, they push you out,
And I think you beat yourself up about that, the delay there, Jamar, but it's still faster than a lot of other Kickstarters.
Well, what was really interesting about that is we were so early into the game. Like Kickstarter was probably a year old, I think, when we started this, and now everybody kind of knows how that sausage gets made with a Kickstarter, and people are conditioned to know how to either trust or not trust or buy or not buy from Kickstarters. But we blew half of our time in the campaign just trying to educate people on what it was.
Kick what now? Kick
Right.
what now?
Yeah. I think people forget that this stuff has to start somewhere.
Well, it was also a really weird thing in the beginning because people were kickstarting. Wasn't the big giant Kickstarter where like somebody was making like potato salad or some weird shit like that? It was like some weird. It wasn't a book. It was like somebody wanted to like make Aunt Ruthie's coleslaw or something like that.
Yeah, it was like a recipe,
like GameStop stock.
Yeah. So,
and
comics is always the last adopter of all new things, right? It's funny. Cartoonists are like, I don't know. Like even today, there's some people that are like, web comics.
Yeah.
And so what I also think is an interesting dovetail too is agent, literary agent, because a lot of people have like agent for if you're doing illustration, right? And they just get you gigs, right? Percentage, and then which is kind of a different thing with comics because you're drawing it and you're creating it, but you're also writing it, and so now you're going into publishing. Even though Scholastic publishes, they're not publishing lots of prose, I don't think, per se. They're mostly publishing like kids' books and reprint things or whatever. But I think it's interesting that it's a literary agent, which is different than if you had an agent who was getting you a cover of Time magazine.
Right. Yeah. And I you know what? And that'll be an interesting thing to talk about because I feel like the art agent might be going through a rebirth or a restructuring because you hear more people talk about you having an art buyer or an art dealer or something like that in comics where you have somebody who's shuffling your pages around for sale, versus getting you gigs. And I have a couple of buddies who have managers who kind of help them procure table spaces or convention setups or get, book planes and housing, and lodging for them during the convention circuit. So I think it's starting to kind of like break into more granular bodies of work. So on my thing, the literary agent, kind of takes an expertise of being in the kidlit world and the book publishing world and kind of advocates for you. Really, that's really what it is. And one of the things that we used to talk about over coffee at the diner was that a lot of people don't know much about that world, and I'll admit that I didn't either, but it's a learning process. Um, so the thing is, like, we usually say that out loud. People go, "Oh, so this is somebody who is just taking your money, right? They take a percentage of everything you do, but you did that yourself anyway." And it's really more about this other universe that I've been in for a while. Is that, and I tell people this: you could go over to Random House tomorrow and get a meeting and bring your pitch in there, and they'll gladly listen to you and gladly offer you a contract, and you get what you get, and you don't get upset. You know what I mean? And I can't necessarily fault the publishers for allowing somebody to do business like that when they don't have representation,
Right.
because that's on them. You know what I mean? But the whole conversation changes when you have an agent who speaks their language, who already has relationships with them, and goes, okay, this is what we're looking for. I'm running red lines through this contract, and you can discuss that, and the table is open in a whole different way. Where again, like say you just go in there and go, this is what I want, and they go, well, no, take it or leave it, and that's
Right. I would also assume that your agent would, like my Hollywood agent, knows what studio is looking for what.
Mm-hmm.
Over there, this person used to be here.
Mm-hmm.
Now they've gone over to this place, and they're looking for books for boys between 9 and 13, and over here they just want girl stuff, or they want books about dogs, or no more books about dogs. Everybody's got books about dogs. Dogs are dead,
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because there's such a thing about kind of like institutional knowledge that literary agents have into the universe of this stuff. Just like Mike says, there could be a drought on cowboy westerns. No more westerns. We're not looking at space operas until 2 years from now. Like that book publishing has its own like ecosystem that we're entirely not aware of.
And they're doing things years in advance. Whereas most of the times we're just like, I got to do next week's episode right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, they also deal with what was I looked up the other day? There's something like 127,000, it might even be more than that, libraries in the United States. This is a huge number of libraries. And so if Scholastic can sell one copy to every library, that's a big number. If you can sell 3 to some libraries, and that's not even including all the schools that don't have libraries, because not every school has libraries, right?
It's true.
So you have all the libraries, and you have all the schools that have libraries. So yeah, when you get into that whole thing, and you can probably tie that into, you just went to
Texas. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And you can talk about, and how that probably gave you a ground floor of like, okay, this is what this world is. Just like if you go to San Diego, you kind of see what the world of comics and entertainment all is, and sort of like slightly distorted bubble.
Yeah, that's a great point, Mike. And I always invite people who are curious about how all this stuff works, is to, and like when we talk to people at shows, like somebody comes up to your table and asks you very broad questions, or they just kind of wandered into the convention center, and I was like, oh, so let me see your portfolio. Oh, I bring a portfolio. Like, all right, well, let me get your card. Oh man, I would say things like, okay, it sounds like you need to start on the ground floor. Maybe what you need to do is go home and figure out what this thing is and how you can jump on the bus next year. I didn't tell you to get a table or draw a comic and bring it back, but spend a year doing recon. The area you live in, what conventions happen, what time of year are they? You should go and just start to show your face, make contacts, make network, get on an airplane and go to San Diego one year, just so you see what this stuff is.
Yeah.
And I think, if more people thought about the business end of it, like I have no idea what this is, but I want to do comics. But the whole other part of that, is the other half of this equation, right?
Which is actually, when you think about it, ends up being the most important part, because if you have a great idea, but you have no idea of where it fits or how it fits or if it will fit, you can spend a lot of time sort of like trying to go down an avenue that, like, well, that's not the avenue to go down with that project. And this is something that I think is never really, there's lots of classes on graphic novels now, because I hear graphic novels are cool. So but they don't have classes that encompass this part of the, like, nobody talks about having a literary agent. Nobody talks about, and this ground is always changing. In 5 years, it's changed drastically. Webtoons spending all that money in the last 5-10 years has drastically changed the ground plane, the playing field for young people coming in. So while you were doing your Kickstarter and you're doing Leon and you're pursuing this one avenue, you got this other avenue. It's also coming along at the same time.
I mean, it's a, when I first got into comics, and this is one of the funny things that I love about our relationship, Mike, because we all kind of came in through different doors in comics. I saw a very strong train track going through comics, but it was indie comics and mainstream comics, right? So either you were an indie black and white guy or you worked for DC.
You're a cowboy
or an Indian, right? And it's just kind of like, and there was a lot of resistance and opposition and things that I found out the hard way. Is like I thought everybody just loved each other, but it's kind of, there was like a lot of like hesitancy, like who are these people and what do they want, or you do your own comic books because you weren't good enough to work for Marvel.
That section is illegitimate. The other side is illegitimate in some way.
Right. It's like at this table you get fish heads for dinner.
Well, you know, I can tell you as a mainstream guy who always desired to work in the mainstream, but I always liked all kinds of cartooning, right? I would meet, over the years, you would meet some quote unquote underground or indie people, right? Because that term was always flexing. And sometimes they'd be really awesome. Sometimes they'd be assholes. They'd be kind of like, oh, Neutron. Yeah. Really? You and I went to that thing at the Philadelphia Public Library where they had Spiegelman and a bunch of those dudes. And a couple of them were nice, and a couple of them were just assholes.
Yeah.
They were just stuck up. They're like, oh, you know. And to me, it's like, what do you care for? I like Mad Magazine. I like Zap. I like Heavy Metal. I like Jack Kirby. You know, I like Black Hole. You know what I mean? You like something, you don't. But yeah. And even at SBX, there was a little bit of that. You know, attitude.
And oh yeah, and to that, like, and this is, we'll save that for Gallagher, because Gallagher is part of his origin story is being part of that flex, you know, trying to do full color superhero indie comics at an indie comic book festival, where I remember Gallagher stuff looked too good to be there. That, you know, these are what people say these things out loud.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, or you just couldn't get into the other comic shows, so you came here to steal our money. You know, people have weird things to say about us just trying to get started.
Well, you know, that's why there has never been, except for animation, there has never been an artist union made up of people who draw. And there never will be. There is the National Cartoonist Society, but it's just a bunch of dudes that get together and a couple of gals. But there's no union support your brothers aspect to it, right? The only one was animation. And whenever there's been talk about doing that in comics, not to sidecar the conversation,
Mm-hmm.
it's really hard to get 20 cartoonists together and move the needle.
It's hard to get 20 cartoonists to pay a bill after dinner.
It's hard to get 4 on the same Zoom call.
Right. No, but yeah, to Mike's point, that's correct. I think the business is insular in that you spend so much time climbing up this muddy hill that I think it's hard to look around and pull other people up with you. I think, in the relationships I gathered starting out in SPX and stuff, it seemed more familial and more fraternistic in a way. Like, hey man, how'd you do this? This is awesome. Oh, I did it with I have a little screen print pressed behind the thing.
Sure.
It was more like maker talk.
Yeah.
Everybody was doing the DIY thing. But, I found out that not everybody carried the same kind of feeling about creating comics. But I do agree with Mike that there were, there's camps, and I think it's opened up a lot more than when I started.
Do those camps even have people?
I think the spinner rack side of the world, the Marvel DC side, they were all fighting for limited shelf space, spinner rack space. All that stuff was so, zero sum. There can only be one Amazing Spider-Man artist per month, and so people are fighting for that, or Wolverine, or X-Men. I mean, okay, so there could be a dozen Spider-Man titles, but the idea was that they were all fighting for the same work, and so a union would be like, are we going to create something that protects me at the expense of somebody else? Is it to keep the younglings from taking my seat? It was always, but in the independent side, it was always like, well, we're not even invited into that party. We have to find our own way. So banding together just seemed to be more, it wasn't zero sum. It really had a sense that, a rising tide could lift all boats. It was a different, so that didn't create wasn't the only reason why there were cliques, but I think it was, I don't know, from an attitude perspective, it just fostered more community.
Well, also every clique then has people that feel that they're the leader of that particular clique, and then that clique dies. Like every movement, like how many art movements were there in the 20th century that lasted about 7 years, and then they die, and then there's another movement, and then those people are the head, and they're like, oh, well, we don't like so and so, he went and did that, so we're kicking that, we're kicking that person out. There was a lot of that was going on because once Scott Pilgrim and Ghost World and all these other things start coming along and start making money, it changes the game, because you were sitting there as an artist drawing your underground comic, indie comic, and you're selling, probably maybe 20,000 copies if you're lucky back in the day. And all of a sudden somebody options your thing and you make more money off the option than you ever made drawing any of the stuff. Then if they make it, then that changes things. And some people get bent. It's sort of like, those people sold out, they're the golden child. I mean, you could really, if you back up 15 years, you can just see how all that starts happening in the early 2000s when the indie stuff started becoming, getting made into film. Changed the Little Rascals aspect of a lot of the small press stuff. And then many of those small press people then started doing mainstream stuff. Right? And even Mocha, it became really hard to get in Mocha. It used to be easy to get in Mocha. Suddenly it became very hard to get in Mocha. It became very hard to get in SPS. So,
now SPX is a lottery system. There's a bunch of people are let in as a, they're sort of like grandparented into it because they were there from the beginning, but they are, half the room is lottery now, so random, just so people have a chance to get in.
My
So-
dad is Steve Conley. I get a legacy pass.
That's right. I'm putting a Steve Conley mask on. No, I'm Steve Conley.
Oh,
That's Conley.
Well, Jamar, I wanted to ask you. I still want to figure out the transition from
sure.
Leon, Protector of the Playground, to Leon the Extraordinary, because
Okay.
there's narratively there's a transformation there. But I want to jump in with some questions from the community. We got actually it's two great questions, and this is a good. Let's start with this one.
Okay.
I want to. It says D. Brad Gibson on Facebook asking. I want to start inking drawings with a brush. I usually use pens that I dip in India ink. Can you recommend a brush?
Mike.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Oops.
Use $10,000 brush. It makes all the lines.
Wait, is there a good brush for a starter? Is there like one that like is a transitional from a pen to a brush? Maybe it's got stiffer bristles. Maybe it holds a line a bit tighter.
I think most cartoonists use a number 2 to a number 4 sable hair brush, a Kolinsky sable. Some people can now use synthetic. I use those. I would buy the Dick Blick Studio Sable number 4s. Those were good. The really expensive, the Series 7 Winsor Newton, which that everybody, they're shit now. They're just really bad now. They're like damp mops. They used to use a specific kind of Kolinsky hair, and whoever bought the company, however they changed their process of purchasing the hair, the quality of the hair is what makes the brush. So I would say you could buy a Lowell Cornell round, buy the Dick Blick. They're cheap, they're under $10.
What's the name again, Mike?
The Studio Sable, Dick Blick.
Okay.
You could buy the Lowell Cornell round. You could try one of the Pentel water pens, which is what I also use. A lot of guys switched over to those. Yeah, you get a fine. And then you just have to practice on paper, inking and drawing with a brush until you find the one that goes, yeah, this is the one that I like, because there is no one brush, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know guys who use a number 7. I use guys who use a number 2. Al Williamson used a number 4. Ricardo Villagrán would use the worst, crappiest brush, and it would look like, fantastic. So it really comes down to what works for you, and the only way you can really find that out is you get a bunch of paper and you just spend a couple of days.
Mm-hmm.
You do practice drawings to ink, or you practice ink. And in fact, on one of the old, I showed a bunch of old practice sheets that I had from when I was still a teenager. And I would literally sit there and I would practice, okay, with this pen or with this brush. And I would practice with a thicker brush or a thinner brush. All the great Filipino guys use those long Chinese brushes.
Mm-hmm.
And they would not rinse them out. They would let that brush harden to a point. So guys like Alex Nino or Nestor Rolando or Rudy Nebres or all those guys, they're fantastic brushmen. They can do anything with a brush, and they use those long Chinese brushes. So you may find that something like that works for you. But that's always my recommendation: is you get a bunch and you practice, and then you see which one works for you. Like Bruce Timm. I remember the first time I met Bruce, I thought, okay, looking at Bruce's stuff, it looks like he works with a brush. No, he doesn't use a brush or a pen. He uses markers.
So you're saying the brush picks the wizard? The other.
Yeah, I was shocked because I was sure that Bruce was like a brush guy, and no, and he would take those markers, man, and he would make it look like a brush. But
Was he using microns?
I don't think he used microns. He was using, at one time, he was using some kind of pentel that they don't make anymore. This is like 20 years ago. Was using a pentel, and he uses those Pantones for doing all the color. I mean, everything is all marker. He's a marker guy. He may use a little colored pencil sometime here or there. But I was shocked because I was assuming, looking at his stuff, okay, he loves Kirby and Wood and all those guys. He would be using a brush, but no, he wasn't. I sat next to him at a show. He sat at my table, and he was doing a bunch of sketches. He was blowing them out using those markers, and he could make that marker
make it sing.
Yeah,
and I guess that's something to always add is that, and Mike says this all the time, there's no magic pencil, right? You could easily just go to Michael's Arts and Crafts and get some cheap brushes and just start using them and see how it feels. Then you can slowly kind of upgrade into things that maybe make more sense to buy, because you don't need to. You don't need to dump a bunch of money on. One of my favorite tricks, and this is from being a teacher, is like go get the Dick Blick educational catalog where you can buy 60 brushes for $40, or you can buy a case of crayons,
the finest ear hair.
Like you can buy stuff in bulk and just like destroy it and just get used to, one, using a tool, and two, making it not precious.
Or the other thing is, who do you want to ink like? You want to ink like Alex Raymond. You can buy the type of brushes and pens that Alex Raymond inks with. If you want to ink like Mobius, you can buy, or Virgil Finlay, or you want to ink like Terry Austin, you use the Hunt 102, right? There are certain people that use certain brushes or certain pens, and if you want to get a line that looks like their line, you can use that similar tool. It still takes practice, right? And the brush takes the most practice to master, more than the pen. But so that's just buy stuff. Try to find out. It's usually pretty easy to find out what people use. And if you're following somebody on Instagram and you like what they're doing, ask them what they use. Oh, what pen are you using? What brush are you using? What kind of paper are you using? The main thing now is finding good paper. If you like using,
we've got a good bit of a follow-up question here from Christopher Mariano. Hello.
Chris, what up, Chris?
He asks, was it hard to make the switch from using the real brushes and paints to using digital technology? Mike?
Yes, it was an adjustment. And that's because when you have a sheet of paper and you're inking on a sheet of paper, here's one of my line down sketches, right? So you hear that this paper has a texture to it. If I'm on the screen, there's none of that texture. And so the pen on here gives a certain resistance. My hand gets a feedback, right? And the feedback between my hand and the humidity, the type of paper, the type of utensil I'm inking with, tells me a lot when I'm inking. Oh, the ink's getting dry, or the brush is getting dry, and I can do a nice dry brush, or I can go with this feeling, or this paper is kind of grunchy and I'm using a grunchy pen and it's going to give me the kind of a crumbly line. There's all kinds of things that I get using traditional media. When I do it in the digital, as we talked before on the podcast, it muscle memory, and I'm crafting a line looking at like, oh, here's G Pen or Bob's Burger or whatever pen you download from people are always making all kinds of pens. 99% of the time, the pen is always the same, right? It's always gives you more or less the same kind of line, unless it's like a real grunchy, like dry brush kind of a pen. So what I had to do was learn how to craft a line digitally, which might mean that I have to ink a line twice, or I have to figure out, okay, what will this computer and this tablet and this program give me? Okay, this is like sort of like default line. Okay, do I like that? Doesn't matter. You know, if I'm doing sort of like a animation line, simple thick thin line, no problem. But if you want an illustrative line, if you want a line that starts thin and gets thicker, or you know the brush starts to lose the ink, well, there's no way to replicate that naturally. You have to sort of like, well, I can't really do that. I could go back and get the dry brush and try to get a feeling with it, but it's not going to be the same thing. So, you know, on the strips, I feel like in one way it doesn't matter as much because they're reduced down so far in the newspaper. Like the strip is like this big,
Right.
literally that big. You're not going to really see the dry brush. You're not going to see, you know, back in the old days, the strips were printed big, so you could actually see the penmanship. So, and that might actually not be important to you. You might have a simple, clean, thin, thick line, and that works for you. So it really is sort of like all over. There's no one answer again, because everything is conditional to what you want as an artist, what you can get out of the program, right? Like I don't like inking in Photoshop, right? Clip Studio is 1,000 times better than Photoshop. Photoshop is better than coloring for me. And I've been using Photoshop much longer than Clip Studio, so I don't really like the way Clip Studio's interface is for things, just because I've been using Photoshop since what, 94? So I've been using it a long time.
What about you, Jamar? Did you switch from using real brushes? What are you doing Leon with right now? It's all pen and ink, or?
Well, the first, this is interesting, kind of, we'll get back to that story. I switched up a couple of times. I thought, you know, at the advent of having this giant project, I bought all of this stuff. I bought pads and pads of Bristol, and I was going to bang out this project because I wanted the stack. I wanted that stack. But then just logistically and time-wise, it just didn't make sense anymore. So I did it digitally. So I did the whole project in Clip Studio.
Wow.
Yeah. So I mean, there's certain pages that were scanned, and because I did them traditionally, but there's probably less than 50.
It goes faster, doesn't it? It goes faster, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's one of the reasons why I switched over digitally, is that I'm a fast inker, but I can ink even faster in Clip Studio, because if you're inking with a dip pen, you got to ink and then like, okay, got to put this over here and let it dry, or like,
or put your elbow through it.
Uh-huh.
You know, and I had the opposite problem that Jamar had. Jamar wanted the stack. I have a stack. I have like
a mountain.
Judge Parker, right?
Yeah.
And after a certain point, it's like, well, if I keep doing this strip, I want to have like a 10-foot tall stack of originals.
You've reassembled a tree,
right? Yeah. So again, it's sort of like, I think artists just have to be willing to adapt, because we live in a time now, unlike the previous generation, the golden age guys. You know, Al Williamson always inked with a pen and a brush. He never used a digital tablet, right to the end of his career. But there's nobody now who is using a Wacom now will be using anything like this Wacom in 10 years. because even this laptop won't be the same in 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then that you get so used to the interface, because I hear this all the time from people I know. It's like, well, wait a minute, what happened to that thing used to be over here? What? Oh, it's now in another menu, and you just got your keys programmed to the way that you want, and then they introduce some new thing, and like, oh no, you hit F11 and your stuff is permanently erased.
They move the goalposts all the time. Mm-hmm.
We're gonna have we'll be streaming episodes of Pencil to Pencil from our artists back to tanks. We're just floating there.
That's right.
For me, it was weird with the transition in that all my work from 94 to about 2004 was all done digitally with a mouse. And then I picked up pen and ink around 2005 and started doing brush work mostly with Pentel brush pens until the iPad came out. And that actually, the familiarity with the brush pens made it the segue to the iPad a lot easier. Had I just been using a mouse, I don't think I'd be as good with the iPad as I am. But thankfully, because every digital tool is just pretending to be, it's desiring to be a physical real world tool. It's all Pinocchio. It wants to be a real boy. And being familiar with the real tools makes the digital tools so much easier because you understand the metaphors they're using. You know, just trying to explain what an airbrush is digitally to somebody who's never seen one, who doesn't understand what Frisket is, or you know, it's impossible. So and that ties to a question we had. Do I do everything digitally? Yeah, I do. Everything is I do sketches for my Patreon supporters and at conventions, things like that. I'll do physical artwork, sketch cards, sketch postcards. You know,
it's start an episode of, oh, you're sitting there and you're watching something and you doodle something and go, oh, I like that figure, so I'm gonna you know, scan that in and use it on my my next. You know, you never do that. I'm going to use it on my next. You know.
No, I haven't yet. I haven't yet. It's all digital now. Even when I'm doing sketches that are going to be referenced, like when I'm doing the 3D work now, I bring in the sketch as reference to give me inspiration for what I'm doing in the molding and the digital clay and all that stuff. It's still a sketch I've done on my iPad. Plus, my eyes are getting older. I love pinching and zooming. I love zooming in on stuff.
There's always if I recall this, and this is maybe for people who work digitally, isn't there kind of like an unwritten rule that you shouldn't zoom in too much? Because you start doing detail work at such a
down to the pixel.
At a pixel level.
Beyond that, when I was working vector from 94 to 2000, whatever, that was vector. That was like Illustrator. It was free. It was a program called Macromedia. It's freehand Macromedia. It was owned by a bunch of people, Aldous, Macromedia, so on. Yeah, absolutely, Tim. And you could zoom in infinitely. You're basically, there's Ant-Man, and you're in the microverse, and there's like, you're going, time doesn't matter anymore. And and you'd print it out, and it's like, oh, I was working smaller than a pixel, you know.
What I liked about Streamline, if I remember, is didn't it have like an auto trace?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Photoshop has that feature built in now.
Does it?
Yeah, you could select a thing and then turn the selection into a path and then export the path as an Illustrator file. So
look at you just crunching the numbers over there, Steve Connolly. I love it.
I just want to be able to punch a thing and do it.
Yeah,
punch it, Steve, and have him do it.
There you go, even better.
You know, I don't want to have to like making paths and all these other. It's like, oh, then it starts getting complicated. I just want a computer, trace it, okay, make it look better, a little bit more, yeah, good.
But you know, well, I marvel at how Steve uses the iPad. Like even your 3D renderings you've been doing of your characters is all on an iPad. That blows my mind.
You should get a sponsorship.
Yeah, you should, Steve.
I can't get Nomad Sculpt to retweet me. I don't know. It's
really
an uphill battle. Yeah, and Tim is saying that I see here on YouTube that Tim is saying auto trace is wonky though. Absolutely.
Yeah, what's up, our buddy Amani? What up, Amani?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. We're playing dueling banjos back here.
We both clicked.
It says I've been using Clip Studio Paint and a Wacom 1. there's always people who are getting their feet wet in the stuff, or they kind of have their first piece of kit, and then at some point you're going to have to get a new piece and then a new piece. And for a long time, my first Wacom was an Intuos, like it might have been a Intuos 4, where that's like not a Cintiq, it's just like a slate, and you draw.
Mm-hmm.
You draw on your lap, looking at the monitor.
And Brian Boland still works that way.
Right.
He's used to it. His hands over here, and he's drawn. His eyes are elsewhere.
I have to do that. I still have to do that. Because when I got my first digital tablet, was the same thing. I got a big one, probably about that big, I guess. And so I'm not looking at my hand. Obviously, I'm looking at the screen.
Right.
And drawing. And even though I have the Wacom, sometimes I'm looking at the Wacom. A lot of times I'll look at the screen. It depends upon what it's like the whole thing is, this is such an organic process.
Mm-hmm.
There's no one way, one path, one answer. You might do one job one way, or you might do half the job one way, or you might do 5 minutes this way. And when you come back from having a sandwich, you're looking at the screen. Or you're looking at it. It's like you don't really think about it other than, oh, wait a minute. Why is this not doing what I want now? What's going on here? Oh crap, I gotta restart. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I think, especially when you're younger, you get sort of enthused by the technology, and you find the right program and the right thing. Really, when you're really in the heart of creating, you're not thinking about any of that stuff. You're just saying, I want this line to look this way. I want to be able to do this thing. You just want your program to be able to do it in the way that's best or the most convenient for you, which for one person like Brian Boland does this stuff that looks like his old traditional artwork. If I was doing those covers, I would want to do them by hand. So I actually had a physical cover, but that's obviously not an issue for him, right? He doesn't really care about having the physical cover. I mean, when I talked to Bill Sienkiewicz, I think I mentioned on the show a while ago, he lost a bunch of art because eventually a bunch of backup drives went down, and you're constantly migrating. You're going to lose stuff. There's just hope that you have a high res on a server that's off site, or at least you have a nice copy on your website or something, because it's inevitable. You're just going to lose stuff.
Hey man, my zip disks are never going to fail me.
My 88 megabyte SideQuest discs.
Oh my God.
And I think
they were a thing for about a week.
And I think it's interesting that you kind of look at this kind of like digital started to like filter into a lot of artists. Like I know our buddy Dave Gibbons from Watchmen fame was a big manga studio user. If you look at like some of he's an early adopter.
Yeah.
And there's tutorials of him doing like whole pages in Manga Studio, which is now Clip Studio Paint, where people are like, wait, what? And you would think that somebody like Dave wouldn't be doing that kind of, tech crunch, but whatever works for you, whatever makes your,
Yeah. I think a lot of it is sort of age related, in the fact that I think the older you are, probably the more you want to actually have a physical original. You cherish the physical original. You worked for a physical original. You trained for a physical original. And so that is sort of like your default setting. That is for me. I would always prefer to have an original. I don't mind working digital. I think digital is fine. But at the end of the day, if you said, okay, for the rest of your career, you could only work one way, I would default to the original, because I would at least like to have my original.
Right.
And right on point, our buddy Jamal, what up, Jamal? Jamal says, there's also something called digital rot. Eventually, it's all going to disappear. And, even in my video game world that I like to live in, there are a lot of people that are starting to get really suspicious of like a certain run of Sega CDs that are they have disc rot.
Right.
Right. You know what I mean? So, I mean, that's always a thing. And I know people who have backups of their backups and then they have an offsite backup. Remember Drobos? Remember that, Steve?
Sure.
I don't know where Kurtz is, but yeah, there was a period of time when, you couldn't get a Super Terra tetrabyte hard drive from Staples.
Right.
Like you could get like a 500 gig, and that was a lot.
Right.
You
And
know,
that was a lot.
that
Yeah.
was a lot. That was a lot. So the Drobo was kind of like, I don't know, like a server rack for, a small business where you could put all your external drives in like one rack and then link them all together. But I guess they don't use those anymore.
And then you like blow out the lights in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Boo!
We have everyone's keychain's got a thumb drive with more memory than everything done in the aughts.
See, there you go, Tim.
That's great.
So I mean, to that, this is always going to be an evergreen conversation because we're always going to talk about tech. We're always going to talk about how you integrate this stuff into your workflow. We talk about workflow, and I think it's a mark of the modern cartoonist to be at least savvy of this stuff. I learned a long time ago that you don't need to own everything. You don't need to run out and buy shit every 5 months because something new came out. And we're all kind of like, I don't know, superstitious in a way. Like Mike might use CS6 on his computer just because it works.
I know a certain person who likes to use older versions of stuff because they don't want to upgrade.
Mm-hmm.
They want to upgrade their phone. They don't want to upgrade their Instagram. They don't want to upgrade. They like this is what I want.
Mm-hmm.
I want to use this forever. And the companies push you along, right? I mean, now everybody has to have a subscription,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
They eventually make the new chip, and then all of a sudden, oh yeah, you're using that old software. Ha ha ha! Our new chip doesn't use that software, but for $50 a month, you will forever be able to use our software.
Yes, joke's on you.
Yeah. And right now there's a 13-year-old out there who is falling in love with drawing and creating comics, and they're never going to do anything the way that we do it, right? If they keep doing it through their teens, by the time they're in their late teens, early 20s in college, they will be doing things in a different process. If you've been reading stuff digitally as much, if not more, than you read stuff traditionally,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to have a very different relationship with the material. We're from the old world where everything is, like a thing, a physical thing. I have my physical comics. I sat on my front porch as a 10-year-old with my physical comics. I didn't have to go like, oh, I can't sit outside now. I got to go inside and plug it in because it's going to run out of juice. Or, I mean, I've seen a lot of young people suffer, I guess what I call like a digital anxiety, right? First thing the students would do when they came into the room is figure out where the plug was for their phone or their pad.
Mm-hmm.
That never happened to me, right? I never went into any class. I never went into any institution. I never went into any place worrying like, oh, now I can't enjoy the museum. My battery is dying. Right? And conversely, the business drives it. So if you're working in Hollywood, you've got to use whatever program they want. You've got to use. A couple of years ago, Mimi was taking a class out in California, and I was talking to one of the guys that worked at the place, Brainstorm, or CDA. And they have a lot of great classes, a lot of really talented people, talented teachers. And I go, the thing is that you got these nice paintings on the wall by John Watkiss and other people doing this traditional stuff. And I said, thing is that we're all working digital because Walt Disney says I want your digital files. I want you to give me a drawing of Mickey Mouse that I can put on everything forever, right? I want to be able to take this digital file and repurpose it forever. I need you to give it to me in the way that I want it. And next year, they're going to want it in a different way, in a different format. And if you're a fine artist, you can work whichever way you want. But if you're a commercial artist, King Feature no longer has a bullpen. So I can't send my originals to them like Frank Robbins 1971 and take my blue pencil and shade in where I want the guy in the bullpen with the people. In fact, I had a young guy contact me today to ask me if I was interested in having him letter the Phantom, and I wasn't, but I just thought, like, wow, the idea that then I would take my strip and send it to some guy somewhere in the world, and he would digitally letter it and then send me the file back just seemed kind of strange.
Like futuristic, you mean? Or just or you're kind of giving up some of your process.
Partially that, and also the fact that King wouldn't pay me any extra anybody else to do it, so it would be coming out of my own pocket. I mean, there was a couple of guys that lived in Connecticut, and they would go around and they lettered like everybody's strips. They'd pick up like 10 guys' strips in a day, and go letter them and take them all back. But
that reminds me of hearing stories about, and this maybe came up in some of our cartoonist episodes, strip cartoonists, where there used to be gag men,
right,
who would go around like the different studios and sell jokes.
Yep.
Yeah, I met a couple. I went to a National Cartoonist Society meeting pre-pandemic down here in Florida, and one or two of the cartoonists there were people. Well, I used to send jokes to that cartoonist or that cartoonist, and they'd use them.
It's Morty Boingbaum. He used to write jokes for Kingfish's strip. You remember that, right?
I love it.
I wanted to get back to, if I could, to the origin story of Leon, but there was I thought there was a nice question here, which might be a nice segue. Danny Fry on YouTube asks, did anything surprise you about middle grade graphic novels from an editorial content perspective, like humor, action, etc.?
That's a good question, Danny. I think, well, I feel like my education into middle grade books started before this Scholastic deal, because I did a graphic novel before that. I did another graphic novel before that, which was like YA. And some of the things that I hadn't thought about is that there's a speed or maybe a flow to doing traditional comics. We talk about the traditional 6-panel grid, right? We talk about the 6-panel grid. Jeff Smith is a perfect example of the 6-panel grid that works. Most of Bone is in the 6-panel grid, or it's close. And kind of going into middle grade world, especially for graphic novels, you start to realize that that's not necessary. Like, you don't have to do 6 panels a page. Sometimes you don't, maybe 3 is enough. So it's kind of like there's a different speed to doing middle grade work in the storytelling. And it's not necessarily that somebody gave me a PDF with all these rules in it. You just kind of have to like learn how to dance at this speed. You know what I'm saying? So content is king. Relationships and character development are key, but it's not exactly all about dynamism like you would find in a mainstream comic book. A lot of times you don't really see a lot of splash pages, or a kid jumping through a window with glass all around them. So some of your kind of like go-to rules about doing superhero books or things like that don't really translate the same in middle grade work. And some of it's just kind of trial by fire. Like editorial will tell you like, well, this is great, but can you maybe make it 2 panels instead of a splash? Or can you kind of like ground this kid in around where he is more than just, like Hank Ketchum tricks or Toth blacking out half of the page doesn't work the same way in middle grade.
Where in the process would you get that kind of feedback?
Probably in your thumbs, but sometimes things get caught later. You really want to try to work all that out before you're inking.
Do they want a certain amount of backgrounds? Like, we need a certain amount of backgrounds on this page. We just don't want you to draw floating heads talking.
No, I haven't run into that, but that's also kind of like, I guess, like a personal rhythm. And also, I mean, I'm glad you brought that up, because then there's kind of like the manga conceit, right? Where you can kind of like get away with not doing a lot of backgrounds on a lot of pages. But I think it just kind of it's informed by what kind of story you're telling. But some things that I've found interesting is, like, I always go back to Ketchum. There's some great Dennis the Menace strips where he might invert silhouette everything, like the whole thing's in black, but Joey and Dennis are in white, or something like that. Things like that could confuse a kid if you just decided to switch. You turn the lights off, basically, and there would be somebody that would tell you that that's confusing. You know what I mean? Or,
Sure.
Well, why did that happen? And it's almost more of a thing of like, from my experience so far, is like everything is fair game, but you have to maybe defend it, or like, can you explain why this happened? Like, why are the panels organically hand drawn on this page, but then they're tight boxes on the next one?
Right.
So it's like you're creating this universe, and as long as you're consistent with it and can maybe just explain it in the story, it's fine. But probably more to Danny's question is more about, there's editorial things like in this new world, there's sensitivity readers, and there's people that aren't your people who are giving feedback somewhere down the line.
Sensitivity reader. So what does a sensitivity reader do? Like, they look at stuff to see if, like, oh, this is going to trigger some kid who might.
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And, I guess you can look at it as being like sensitive, or it's a whole other market. So if you're making products for kids, it kind of makes sense that there's some fail safes in there, so after they printed 400,000 copies of a book, oops.
Yeah. They'll start they have to put stickers through 400,000 copies of books if they mess up.
Sorry, Batman's penis.
I was working on an educational comics project, and we were doing these math. Basically, it was kind of like taking these math problems and turning them into narrative stories. So kids would be like, okay, how do we make kids read math? And so we turned into this adventure. And so one of the stories was written from the perspective of a fantasy story. So there's a thief running through town, and he's got to do blah, 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 blah. And like, it got through all the way through the process. And then the sensitivity review was like, does it have to be a thief? Because what is that saying? It's like, it was like suddenly the motives of everything can be questioned from every angle. And suddenly, like, what are we trying to say to kids? And that's like, it's a whole thing. And you think this is the classic trope. And
like being a thief is good or something.
It raised questions with somebody. So
right. And I think, again, from being on your own or working on your own stuff for so long, it seems kind of ridiculous that somebody would question these things. Like, one of the biggest things that I've seen, and not necessarily in my projects, but just across the board, is, hammy, tropey, comic booky things, like a villain who's just evil just to be evil,
right,
is really out of favor. It's like, oh, like, you can't have a oil can Harry type, who's just like, right? Like, it's like, well, oh, that's kitschy or something like that. There's something, I'm still learning, and I think the goalposts may move from time to time, but I just feel like there's so much money at stake. And when you're dealing with basically the trust of young people is what I'm drawing for. Like, the family wants to trust that what you're putting in their kid's hand isn't going to like make them go blind. You know what I'm saying? So
Disney's like that. Disney, if you think about it, I saw a program once, and it ties directly into what you're saying. As a corporation, you don't see really cheap, bad Disney products because Disney wants people who spend money on their entertainment, toy, birthday card, whatever, to go like, oh, I bought this and it was good and I liked it. And the person I bought it for liked it or it went well. They never want to have like, oh, I bought that Disney birthday card and the sparkles came off and went in my kid's eye and we had to go to the doctor. Right. Or there's the toy broke in a week.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Because that reflects back poorly upon the parent company if too many things like that happen. So I'd imagine a big, huge publishing place like Scholastic, they don't want to have like, well, we published, 50 books last year. 20 of them were cited by, the American Parental Goody Two Shoes Association who said, no. Then they might say, well, don't bring your Scholastic magazines to that.
Right. Now, here's interesting, and there's some Eternitine has a good question in here. Ronaldo just says, sometimes that sensitivity takes all the color out of a story and makes it cookie cutter and bland. I'll push back against that by saying, yes, I would agree in a lot of places, but I think it's up to the creativity of the author to work around that. Like we're storytellers, you figure out a way to make it hot. If they don't like it one way, you give it to them.
Can you work clean? Can you be entertaining and work clean? A lot of classic movies, classic shows, classic music, things that are loved by generations of people are clean, and if the only way you can do it is like by making it blue or making it, ugly, then that's sort of like, well, the only way we can make Spider-Man cool is we have to kill him. Right? Or we have to do some other thing. And if you think about, for half a century or more, most of this material they made for children, you never really had to worry about that. Kids always, I remember when I used to give out comics for Halloween. So when I was on the mailing list for Marvel and DC, I'd save all my comics. And then every Halloween, I didn't give out candy. I'd give out comics. And I'd have to kind of go through like, I don't know.
Right.
Right. Because, I'm a single guy living in my house. What are you giving to my kid? You creep, So I'd have to go through it. And every once in a while, you would see a comic like a Hellraiser or something that had like some demonic thing on it. And then like, kids were like, oh, they would try. No, can't have that. It's not for you. What? No, that looks cool,
Right. And, and I mean, that goes to being a kid, and like kids always try to find things that are above their state because that's,
but the publisher doesn't want to publish something that's above their pay grade. If they go and get it, well, fine. You know what I mean? We didn't sell it to them. You know what I mean? You let your kid go into the adult section in the back, get the naughty book,
Hey, you know what? This is turning into something interesting at a different level. Eternity Forever. Eternity says Frank Cho's University Squared was blue. That was a college strip, and his Liberty Meadows syndicated strip was edited heavily by the paper editors. And if I recall how that worked, Cho basically retired the strip because he was sick of dealing with editorial. But I think and Mike, you could speak to that, like the tried and true, like, I don't know, foundation of syndicated comic strips has a line. And Mike, you've gone up across that line a couple of times, not by your own accord. So I kind of feel like there's only so much you're going to get away with in that space. So if your whole idea is about getting away with something, then maybe it's not going to work in the long term.
Yeah, there's some artists who like to be provocateurs. I think Frank is one of those type of guys who likes to tweak the bubble. I've had never on the Phantom, but several times on Judge Parker, and specifically with the Washington Post, there were strips that had to be edited for the girls looking too sexy, or there was one where there was some gunplay. Even though there had been previous gunplay in the strip, and there's been gunplay in the strips over the years, but every once in a while, maybe it's a new feature editor, or maybe it's an old feature editor. Whoever the one person was who was editing the paper just decided, like, I don't like there being sexy girls in this strip, and you've got to remove their breasts, or you've got to make their breasts smaller. And so the syndicate would say, well, we're not going to make you do it, but we would like you to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Now the same strip would be going out all over the country, but it was really only one paper and one editor that we had problems with. Now, we haven't had problems with that person in several years. Maybe that person's not even there anymore. I don't know. But yeah, because like Dick Tracy used to have shoot 'em ups and stuff, and it's all sort of context. It was a cartoony drawing of a guy going blam blam, you're dead, flat top, right?
Rootin' tootin', right?
Yeah. Or it's me drawing somebody being shot. Now, I would never draw. In fact, I just had to deal with this on the Phantom. There was a scene where a character got shot, and they didn't want to show the bullet hitting his body, so I had to erase where the pew,
like the trajectory thing.
Yeah,
right?
Meow thing, and it wasn't like a big squib, like falling back, but you could see with a bullet. Now, I thought that was no more than you would see on like Gunsmoke or any G-rated old TV show, but the thing is about a strip is that it goes into all kinds of different communities. In New York City, you could probably have the guy get a shot to the head and nobody cares because it's the New York paper, right?
Right.
But some paper someplace else, some little sleepy town, they'd be like, "Oh my God, Matt Dillon killed the villain." They would. So that's the kind of thing that you don't think about, but you do have to deal with. Because the Phantom is carried in a lot of foreign newspapers, India, Pakistan, all through Southeast Asia, all over. In those countries, you cannot show a lot of skin. So there was a scene I drew of Nirvana in the shower, and she's like showering, and the steam, and you can't see her boobs or anything, right? You can only see a little bit of the bottom of one of her breasts, and they say,
that's under boob.
Yeah, right, but not, nothing you wouldn't see in an ad,
right?
But they said, well, you should probably just put a little bit more steam over that area, because in some of the Muslim countries, they would see that and go like, "Oh, no way, Jose, can we do that? We cannot have, now they may not have a problem with some violence, but you cannot show the female figure in a revealing form." So again, you have all these different community standards, even with the magazine, right? If we did a life drawing or printed Brett's life drawings, we had to put it in a bag. We had to put the adult content warning on it, because in New York, nobody cares. But in Iowa or Georgia or Kentucky, somebody could walk in and say, "Hey, wait a minute. My kid bought this How to Draw book, and it showed a naked lady inside.
Naked with 2 Ks.
Yeah, naked lady." And that was always a concern to John as a publisher. And, it would make me mad, but, he knows the business, he knows the customer base, he knows. And so we would put the thing, because there were for a while like, oh, you could put the
modesty strip across it, right?
No, you bag it, and they don't have to buy it. I would rather sell less issues than to put a modesty strip. I do not believe. And in fact, I once had a student who was a Seventh-day Adventist. And I think it was my first year. So he could never go to the Lane of the Life drawing. He could never go to any museum because there would be, you know, like a naked statue or a painting of a naked person. He couldn't do any life drawing if the model was nude. And I'm like, why are you trying to be an animator and work in a business where you're going to have to learn how to draw the human body? And if drawing the human body is an issue, it seems like you're really setting yourself up to like not have a very good time.
Right.
You know?
I think that's what makes me like talking about that Liberty Meadows thing is that there's still an institution there that, like, you know, we could talk about Bill Watterson getting into hot water with the syndicates because he was trying to buck the page layout, you know,
Right.
and like, and history sees him now as like a firebrand. But I'm sure all those editors were like they were ripping their hair out dealing with him.
Right. They had already sold an ad on that page. How are they going to fit the comic strip that they have to run? Because they're going to get all these angry letters if they don't. But they've already sold the ad, and he's thinking about the art, and they're thinking about the commerce. And
right,
comic strips is the angry letter business, right?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
If you do a comic strip, just prepare to always be getting angry letters. I get you go to the mud hole of the King Features message board, and there's nothing but angry people commenting how they hate every strip every day. And that strip that day is actually worse somehow than the strip that was there the day before. Right? It is so perplexing. I mean, regular comic book fans sometimes be kind of annoying. Nobody can hold a candle to the people who go out of their way every day to go on the message board there and just cry and whine and complain and insult all the creators every single day. I've never really understood that. So on one hand, the syndicate has to appease the customers, which is the papers. Each paper knows what its customer base is in every part of the country. And the comic strip is actually one of the last creative vehicles that has to be so regulated. Because I don't think movies are as regulated now. I don't think, you know, other general entertainment is regulated as now. The only time movies runs into it, it's like what? They said that they couldn't show Doctor Strange, I think, in certain countries because there was a gay character in it. So because they don't allow gay characters to be in any of their entertainment, they couldn't do it, right? So, you know, it's not something that I ever thought that, you know, and most of these strips are very mild. I mean, there's never any debauchery. You never show any sex. You never show you can show characters in bed together, laying in bed together now.
But they can only play Sudoku puzzles.
Right. But I mean, there's, you know, if the Phantom shoots anybody, you're not showing, you know, like headshot. It's not like a Punisher, right? It's not at all. Or even like Batman. That's one of the things that Tony and I often talked about in the beginning, is that he's not a vigilante, right? He's not this angry vigilante killing people, you know, and meting out justice because he's an angry person. Which when you see other people do versions of the Phantom, the first thing they do is they turn him into Batman. You turn him into this, you know, this guy in the jungle who's just like the Punisher. Well,
I think the reason why the comments there are so bad is because we have all the good commenters here. That's the big problem.
Well, I wanted to ask you, Steve, and I think this could almost be like an ageism thing. Do the comments in webtoons seem to lean more positive?
Almost universally. I don't have that big an audience, so it's a small sampling, but I find that the webtoons crowd is incredibly welcoming. Even I would even say that my experience, because my comics also available on Go Comics, which is similar to Comics Kingdom in that it's a kind of an old school syndicate site that has a few dedicated web comics alongside Calvin and Hobbes and Garfield and stuff like that. So my comic is there as well, and I get comments there. And again, it's mostly positive. I think I think some of the legacy strips have a target on their backs. So in a way that is completely unfair, to the point where it's more like it's a community of people, a community of hecklers. They're all Statler and Waldorfs. Just a bunch of unfunny Mystery Science Theater hecklers. And some, actually, I take that back. Some are funny. Some of the comments, some of the blistering comments are absolutely brilliantly funny. But for the most part, like Seth Meyers calls them jackals on his YouTube comments. There's a lot of jackals at the Comics Kingdom site. But Webtoons, very positive. I also find Reddit to be very positive. People warn me, don't go over there, don't go over there. But I don't know if it's an age thing, but I also think there's a heckler quality to what's happening over at Comics Kingdom. They've somehow got that crowd,
and
that's
they like
up
each other. They like to try to one up each other.
Right. They really just want to say something so their buddy who they joke with every day can also make a similar joke about whatever. So it's not. I don't think it's personal there. It is just so negative.
Well, sometimes it gets very personal, like they wanted, bodily harm or things to happen.
I'm sorry about that.
Yeah,
I only wrote that once. I was day drinking.
You had a bad day.
What I want to know, though, going back to talking about Jamar's thing, is so Leon kept developing into what you have now, but poor old Jamar Chronicle, he got hung out. What happened to him now? What happened to old Jamar?
He's still floating through space.
So how many issues did you do?
I only did 2, and that seemed like a lot back then. Like I kind of laugh. Like the Leon the Extraordinary is 272 pages.
Oh,
and I think
book 1 is 772 pages.
And I think my first Jamar Chronicle strip was comic was 16 pages, and that was a big lift for me at the time.
Oh yes, when you did 16 pages, did that seem like you were climbing Mount Everest?
Yes. Yeah, I threw everything I knew at those pages, and this is funny. I submitted the issue 1 in the Comics Journal, and they reviewed it. They tore it apart.
Oh, really? You gotta print that. You gotta bring that on. We gotta.
Yeah.
What did they say?
I think they said ... Nicholas is proficient in cartooning, although he used everything he knew in this one issue. He should learn how to calm down.
Wow.
Or something like that. That's interesting.
You used all your cartooning, Jamar.
It came all out with
judicious use of ellipses could turn that into an excellent pull quote.
That's right. I used everything in my wizard sleeve, and I was all out. But
so after Jamar Chronicles, what was next?
Okay, yeah. So what happened was, I realized that I couldn't afford to self-publish. I was surprised. I was one of those cart before the horse people where I found a place that would print this comic, and this is crazy. In '97, it was hard to find a comic book printer, or you couldn't, or you had to have, Ricky at your Kinko's who knew exactly what he was doing. There's and nobody else knew how to do it. And I think I printed way too many copies of my first.
How many did you print?
5,000. Something like that. It was a lot. I think I have like 8 left. So thank God it took me 25 years to get rid of those comics.
You just driving down the street throwing at people.
Out the parade float. But after I stopped self-publishing, I went into web comics. So it wasn't even web comics yet. I had a newsletter. I had like early emails from people, and then I would email them every Friday. I would email them a new Jamar Chronicles strip. And then later on, I got picked up by some portal like called Comics to Go or something like that, and I did a weekly strip.
Was it like holding a pizza?
Fresh and hot. And then after that, I think that's when I started doing Detective Boogaloo for Kevin Smith.
Well, now how long were you? How long did you do the Jamar Crown? How many strips do you think you made?
Probably like 80 or something like that. I know I had a nice little run, and I started doing mini comics of. This is a really early version of like publishing from web to print in reverse instead of going from print to web. And I started doing little mini comics of the Jamar Chronicles, and I was printing them sideways. So you kind of opened them up like a on a landscape. And then I got into the SPX rhythm where you had to show up every year with something new.
Mm-hmm.
That was just like you couldn't show up there with the same stuff. You had they'd laugh you out of there. So I was kind of coming up with concepts, and I started developing other projects. And I did this one thing called Asteroid Girl and the Space Cadets. And I think that might have been 2000.
Wow.
Steve, did you get one of those?
No, I've never heard of this. This is fantastic.
I don't think I've ever even heard of that.
So it was interesting because I was really heavy into like guerrilla marketing, and I had more stuff on my table than I had comics. But with Asteroid Girl, I started doing DIY printing. Like I did like a Kinko special, and then I put an acetate cover on it. And I printed the Asteroid Girl logo and on the acetate, and then would draw on the first. I was doing stuff. Okay, this is my favorite part. I had the Asteroid Girl Space Cadet membership kit. So if you came up to me at my table, I sold you the comic, and I had a power ring. I found at Oriental Trading. They had like almost like a ring pop, these giant battery operated rings, like Green Lantern rings almost in different colors. And then I had a little micro Polaroid, and I took a picture of you and laminated a card and gave it to you. So I had this little $20 kit that I was hustling at SPX. I think it was 2000.
That's dazzling. I just did a search on eBay. I can't find it. I will find a copy of Asteroid Girl.
I want to see like, oh damn, the Polaroid's not working, and like people's faces aren't showing up.
I love it. Oh no,
side hustle at your table.
Now here's some other history, and I didn't know this was going to turn into the Jamar episode. I'm sorry, but back, and that was like when I was heavy into running the Indie Cred All Stars. That
what year is this?
This is probably 99, 2000, 2001.
Okay.
And that's kind of like when the internet started flipping. So started flipping, and once Google showed up, everything fell apart because nobody needed you anymore. They could just look it up on their own. But the Indie Cred All Stars produced 2 comic books. You might find them in a quarter bin somewhere called Gumbo. And there are a bunch of the Indie Cred All Star people who did. I know there's like Steve Rolston, who went on to do Queen and Country and Pounded and all this stuff, is in it. Calamity John Morris, myself. There's a couple of people who are like big shots. Hawthorne didn't do anything because he was already doing Hysteria then. He was too busy for us. Mike Norton, I think, might have had something in there, like that whole crew. And in the second one, I did an Asteroid Girl story. Yeah, I think that's the only thing that was in print. And then
what was Astro Girl about?
So Asteroid Girl was my magical girl story, and it was about basically these 5 girls who hated each other's guts, who in dire times turned into the Space Cadets. We're basically Sailor Moon clones. And the running gag was that they'd never save the world because they were too busy arguing, and then the world blew up. So I had like, the last page of every comic was the world exploding. It was fun, but that kind of showed a lot of what I was dealing with at my day job because I worked at a college, and I was just surrounded by all of these like ramen noodle haired girls who just, like you know. So that was just kind of just like reporting on that world.
That's great.
Well, enough of Leon. I think you found your real future project.
Yeah, what am I thinking?
Yeah, you better call Scholastic tomorrow.
But then after that, I did, Detective Boogaloo happened, and then I was doing editorial cartoons for the Tribune. You remember all that stuff, Mike? I was just like in hustle mode, and I thought Detective Boogaloo was going to. Detective Boogaloo really raised my profile on the early internet, and I met a bunch of people that way, and like all of a sudden, like I was hanging out with the Penny Arcade guys, and you know what I mean. Like it started that conversation early on in my career, but I always have Boogaloo in my back pocket because I think I could always bring.
It's such a great name. It's such a great name.
Well, I had to put it to bed after like all the stuff in January 6th started happening because there were like dudes using that name in the wrong context. But I've always had a bunch of ideas, and I think that's one of the things I said earlier is that you can find a way to keep moving forward with stuff if you come up against opposition. What was the old potato chip thing? Crunch all you want, we'll make more.
Well, it's a struggle for some people because some people have like one good idea. You know what I mean? It seems like once they get their one idea out, that's kind of like, well, that's just kind of like what they do. And some people can come up with like sit down all day and come up with ideas. Not everybody seems to be able to come up with ideas, or maybe what they do is they just sort of like say no a lot and they shoot down the idea. Because often a young artist will ask me something tonight. Somebody will ask you a question about art. Mm-hmm. And really the only way to ever truly answer any question about art is to do it. Will that color work? Do it. Will that pen, is that the pen to use? Try it. Mm-hmm. Right? A lot of it is really just mileage, the 10,000 miles or the 10,000 billion zillion brushstroke, right? I mean, literally, there is almost no way to answer any question about art other than make a recommendation when it comes to process, because you have to do it, right? Like, I gave Bruce Timm Hunt 108 and said, ink these pages, he would go, no, I that's not what I use. This is what I use. I use this marker, right? And I think you can kind of get stuck on the what if part, and you have a lot of fear about wanting to make mistakes. And I related that actually on my Facebook page yesterday, in that art school is the last place really for most artists who are on the serious track of trying to become an artist for a living, where you can just wreck the car. You can just roll it over and just total it. And there's no consequence, right? Because you're in school and you're supposed to be able to take risks and learn from your failure. And sometimes you learn more from your failure than your successes. Professional, I can't roll the car, right? I can't roll the car and total it and like, oh, well, the last 3 weeks I haven't produced anything that worked. Sorry, King Features, there's no strips.
What? No strips?
Yeah. And you don't really realize that when you're in school. It's one of those weird things. There's so many things you don't realize when you're younger that you realize it when you're older, that you would benefit from if you knew when you were younger. Right?
That's why this channel exists.
And that's true. And that's one of the best things about art school is you have the ability to roll the car, man. And if it's a piece of junk, great. And if you can learn from that, right? You don't get discouraged. I mean, everybody gets discouraged, but if you can learn from that, then you get the most out of school. It's like the person who avoids wanting the teacher to look at their work. Oh, I hope he doesn't come over
No,
I don't want him to. No. Can I start
no.
working on? No.
That happens all the time in school, in our school.
Yep.
Like the shy student. So what are you working on? No.
Let me see. Yeah, let me see. Let me see what you're working on. I didn't bring it.
Yeah, defiantly they say that. I didn't bring it.
I didn't bring it. Oh, so why didn't you bring it? Well, I was having trouble with it. So you're paying thousands of dollars to take this class, but you didn't bring your work, so your teacher can help you with your problem. Helps you how?
There's a lot of fear in art school. There's a lot of fear.
There's a lot of fear in art, right? There's a lot of fear in art. There's a lot of fear of making a mistake. There's a lot of fear of there's the dream, and then there's the fear that you won't reach the dream, and then there's the little nightmares along the way, right? You've got to achieve all these different goals, right? And that's one thing that I see very often. And everybody wants praise. We all want the sun to shine on us, but that's unrealistic, and it's totally unrealistic once you're not in school, right?
So, and maybe on a couple of points, because I don't want anybody to think that this episode, the Jamar episode, was my whole origin story. Was we specifically started
half one, right? Before you were disfigured and had to wear the metal face.
I'm hideous. Like all of that's like, this is just kind of like, a slice of the pie. And there's like a lot of things in between. But one thing that I tell a lot of students or young people I mentor or whatever is that you have to keep moving forward. The fact that we've been doing this podcast for almost 3 years.
But you have the personality. Like I said on my Facebook, you have the personality to be successful.
Thank you, Michael.
You're an outgoing guy. You're talented. But your greatest gift is your outgoing personality, because that also opens up doors. You're a likable person, and it's really important to be a likable person in a business when you're starting out. If people go, "Oh, I don't like that dude," kind of, if people are saying that about you, man, your chances start, unless your work is like, the top,
Yeah.
But I really think since I've known and I've known you a long time.
Yeah.
You have the personality of a person who is and would be successful, right? And that is your number one skill, even above all your creativity and your drawing and your sense of humor and everything. That's really important. And the older I get, I never used to think that when I was younger, I used to think it's like hard work and talent, right? But if you work hard, but you work wrong, right? And if you work hard and you work wrong, so your work doesn't improve, like, you know what I mean? Like, and then when you're young, I always say, well, oh, you're so talented. Like, I was just magically, one day when I was born, God came down and went, poured some talent in my brain. And the other guy went, ha, you're only getting one drop. You're only getting, right? It's nothing you can control, right? And then I found like other people, like I would read like Joe Kubert or other people would say that, oh, the talent wasn't the most important thing, which is completely contrary to what everybody tells you when you're young, right? When you're young, everybody goes, oh, you're talented. Your parents say you're talented. Your teachers say you're talented. Everybody,
he's very skilled.
Right. Yeah. And then you read some other person who's very successful and they go, well, the talent was the most important thing. And it's just like, what? They've been telling me all my career, the most important thing for me to be was talented.
Right. Well, thank you, man. That means a lot to me. That's very special, especially coming from you, Mike. I appreciate that. But I think we all have a responsibility to whoever's listening to us to try to like be realistic. I think that's one of the biggest things about pencil to pencil is like we've never sat up here and pumped the numbers or lied about stuff. And even on boot camps, like we probably get into the hottest water with people because we're just shooting straight, real straight. And sometimes that bristles people's feathers because they're just like, oh, what about the dream? Well, the reality is it's not all the dream, and that kind of turns people off all the time because there's a.
Well, I think have your dream, but then in order to turn your dream into reality, there's those next steps that are very important. And now, if you just want to cling to the dream part and not not do the other steps, well, then your dream will never come true. It just won't. And I think
there's a line in my comic, the Middle Age, which everyone should read, is that the hero says, how are you going to achieve your quest? And it's, well, I have a dream. He said, a plan would be better.
You're so good at that, man.
the reason I say that all the time is because I had a dream. I had to kind of figure out my own plan because there was no plan, right? There was no.
Mm-hmm.
When I grew up, there were no. I mean, it was a Kubert school, but I couldn't go there, and I couldn't go to any of the schools in California, and I didn't have any good teachers, so I had to figure out my own plan.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to kind of scrub it all together, and that's where most people fall off because you're going to get kicked off the wall a few times, and they're going to pour hot oil down on you, and they're going to reject you, and they're not going to be fair, and you can get all caught up in, well, that's not fair. The other person was, the world's never been fair. It's never going to be fair. Mm-hmm. And so I try to use myself not as an example of some glorious, fantastic artist, but a person who had a dream and was able to achieve it. So you should be able to, because I don't feel that I was extraordinarily talented and I did not have a lot of opportunity. I had to make opportunity and take advantage. And there's that sort of wasteland sometimes you're in between being an aspiring artist and a perspiring artist, right? Right? That nebulous area of where are you going to go to school? Are you going to go to school? Can you afford to go to school? Getting into the business, what do you want to do in the business? Oh, I don't want to know. The further along you go and you don't know what you want to do, makes it really hard to focus on any direction far enough to get any kind of measures.
Mm-hmm.
I try to use myself as an example of someone who doesn't have to be rich, don't go to great school, don't have mentors, still, if you're practical, you can make it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, that's fantastic. We're coming up on 2 hours. We got a few questions in the hopper here. Let's do a speed round, lightning round to clear out. Oh,
I love it. Question Palooza. Let's go.
All right. All right. This is a callback to working on Leon,
mm-hmm.
and not about the content, but more about the formatting.
Mm-hmm.
Amani Latif asks on Facebook, does working on a smaller page affect your layout?
I always do small layouts and then blow them up. So there was a point in time where I was working at size, like I was just doing my layouts at 11 by 17 just to see how it felt. And it made it a lot freer, but I spent a lot more time on the light box trying to fix things. So I think working small is probably better for you in the long run. Like I think you can
working original size, like print size.
Oh well, no. Like I think like most of I don't have a thumb sheet, But I've been doing like thumbnails, which are kind of like half of a 3x5
Wow.
part, something like this.
That's great.
And then, when I blow it up or even like magnify it and put it in a clip, I can just kind of like tighten things up from there. So I do think working small.
I would love to see some of those.
Yeah, I'll send some of those over. Work for me. What about you guys?
You go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I when I started working on the Middle Age, I was designing it to work on a phone, and so I knew it had to work. I knew the lettering had to be very large, proportional to the artwork, because it had to be read on a very small device. So to me, that forced me to simplify things down to like 3 or 4 panels per episode per page, and that definitely affected the layout.
So like
Absolutely.
like something.
Yeah, what happened was I was designing initially to work like a newspaper strip, and I hadn't looked at a newspaper in a while, and I looked at this comic strip in there, and I was able to take my fairly small phone and cover 2 comic strips with it. Like the newspaper strips are printed so small now that the phone, whatever you're looking at on your phone's larger. So, but that still was incredibly tiny. I don't know how people are reading newspaper strips right now with a loop, a jeweler's loop or something like that. So I'm, but I knew I wanted the text to be legible, and I don't know what devices will be like in 5 years, in 10 years, but I do know that I want people to be able to read it at whatever size it is. And so large lettering was the biggest consideration for me.
Super retina display, it'll just like burn a hole right in your brain.
Our back to tanks as we're floating.
That's my new rap name, Jeweler's Loop. Mike, do you have an answer to this?
Everything is contingent upon the process that I need for that particular format. Like, I on Judge Parker, originally I drew them 2 up on a single let me see if I have, hold on a second. Let me see here.
Gotta do it fast, Mike. It's lightning round.
Yeah, not the thunder round, the lightning round.
All right. Well, here's some Phantom, right? And so I would draw Judge Parker the same way, right here, this size. Right, and I wouldn't take a lot of time. I would just rough it right out and draw it. In the very beginning, on the Sundays, I would do a little layout, like 11 by 17, same size that I could fit on my scanner. And a lot of the stuff is like, well, what fits on your scanner? Well, the biggest I can fit on my scanner is like 11 by 17 or 12 by 18. 12 by 18 scanner, but I don't think I can get a 12 by 18 image on there. Yeah. So it's usually like 11 by 17. So anyway, but now I kind of went to doing it. Just lay it out, and if I don't like it,
just erase it.
When I do comics, I tend to do little layouts, print size, and then blow those up, and then I would print them out, and then work on a light box. Because I like seeing things print size. I can tell the actual impact it would have on the page. That's what Kubert did. That's what Adams did. That's what Gil Kane did. That's what so many people did. That's a pretty standard thing. And like I said, I think whatever saves you time, right? Because that's the one thing about doing a comic book or a comic strip is time. So you can't like, I'm going to spend all day laying out 10 pages. Wow, none of this works. So hopefully that answers the question.
That's great.
That's a great answer. Thanks,
All right.
Mom.
We got one right for you, Mike. This is from Tim on YouTube. Tim McLean. I don't know if I've ever said Tim's last name.
I think it's Ogline.
Ogline.
Yeah. That's how we've been saying it all these years.
I think I've just known Tim for ages. My goodness. Hey, Mike, are you or have you publishing or have published a collection of the Dead Kid Wind Downs? That's a good question.
The Skull Kids. Yeah.
I did publish a sketchbook that has a bunch of those drawings in it, which you can order from me.
And how do they do that?
You would just email me and email me at mike@actionplanet.com. And they're $20, and I think it's $2 postage. And then if you want one and you send me your, you can do it through PayPal. It's an astronauts. I don't have one here. Do I? I don't think so. I didn't know we were going to talk about my sketchbook, so I don't have one right here on this table. But anyway, yeah. And I'm planning on doing a graphic novel with it. That's what I'm working on. I have about 40 pages roughed out. So I got to get that done. And then I think what I'm going to do is do a Kickstarter for that. I'm not sure whether I could get a publisher interested in doing a book about dead children, dead skeleton children. I think kids would like dead skeleton children, but parents are like, ew, I don't want to buy you.
Probably a way to spin that so it sounds better.
Dead children.
Undead children.
Undead. Yeah. Well, they can't be hurt because they're skeletons.
There you go. Impervious children. I think there's a market.
Yeah.
I like it.
All right, and I think wait, we want to see that. Oh, that's gorgeous. That's gorgeous.
Like he's got a bullet hole in his head and he doesn't have one arm. I mean, it's weird things you just come up when you're drawing. And I think for me, the wind downs, because everything I do during the day is so literally scripted. Like you have to draw this and you have to draw that. I just like whenever I do the thing, it's just whatever goes out of my brain. You know what I mean? They don't have to make any sense.
But also let people know that you do have Skull Kids merch.
Oh yes, on my
my TeePublic
store, there's all kinds of Skull Kids. In fact, I think they were having a sale this month.
Sweet.
On TeePublic, I have all kind. You can get a coffee cup. You can get a phone case, all kinds of T-shirts and hoodies. My mom got a T-shirt. So
do they have?
He laughed himself off the screen.
Will he be back?
He'll be back.
So yeah, go to TeePublic if you're interested in my astronauts and mermaids sketchbook. Just send me an email and then I will send you a link so that you can order it.
That's great. All right, and I think this is our last question. It's a two-parter, sort of, kind of, from D. Brad Gibson on Facebook. How do you design your title logo? That is, I mean, how do you design the title logo for your books? Do you do it yourself or hire someone? How have you handled that?
For my own comics,
or your sketchbooks, or Girl Patrol, or any of the projects you've created of your own.
You designed the astronauts and mermaids for my sketchbook. You designed that one.
Well, you made it easy. You basically gave us you had it 90% of the way there.
Let's see. Usually I design stuff myself. Sometimes I will design an idea like that, and then I will give it to somebody like Steve or Todd Klein to do. I used to do, I did commercial art for several years before I ever got into comics. So one of the things I did very often back in the day was design people's logos. So,
that's great.
Yeah. But back then, a lot of times you were doing it by hand, you were not.
Sure.
There was no computer. So you'd have to, if you picked a font, you'd have to sort of design the whole font yourself. So,
and for me, I design mine all my own. I usually start with a font of some kind, like for the Middle Age, or Astounding Space Thrills. That evolved over many years of different logos and different types. And as I got better, and I got a text from Jamar. He'll be right back. His computer froze. So he'll be right back. So that's a perfect opportunity to talk about how you can pre-order Leon the Extraordinary now. There's a link here somewhere. Let me find that. How do I do that? I want to really promote him while he's away. So he'd be like, he doesn't want to focus on himself. I want to move product. I want to make sure Leon the Extraordinary is the best-selling book of all time.
You can pre-order it, I'm sure, like on Amazon, right?
Yeah, you can. Oh, and here's a link. Oh, it's at the bottom. How do I get rid of the other one? There's so many buttons here. There you go. So you can pre-order Leon the Extraordinary now, and there's a link at the bottom of the page.
Hey, I'm back.
You're back.
You froze. You got the StreamYard froze.
Yeah, I got the heebie-jeebies. Are we closing the show out?
We had some great questions. One of the questions you might have missed was, how do you design the logos for your book, like the title logo? D. Brad Gibson asked on Facebook.
Steve, I think you're the king of that. You should answer that.
I've done a few. I'm actually doing one. I've done a few this year for people. So some of the folks reach out to me. It's fun.
Was that your answer?
Yeah. For me, I designed it myself. I got art. We got.
Oh yeah, art. You know what Yagams means, right? You know, oh yeah, speak, right? So if you hung around Art and Franco long enough, Art and Franco have their own language. Yagams means, oh yeah, man, you're a good man, sir. Thank you, sir. Hello, Art. Good to see you, brother.
We just leave that up on the screen.
Tell him, El Jamal. Tell the gospel. I love it. Thank you.
Do you have a countdown? You should get a calendar with like a counting down the number,
like a doomsday clock.
Yeah, down to when, I don't want to see a news truck go by and like throw a bundle.
Well, I just found this really cool way for people to remember it. So the book birthday, as they call it in book publishing, it's a CB call. 10-4, good buddy.
Mm-hmm.
What?
That's right. Cop all of those. Can I share a thing that I put on my Facebook real quick, you guys?
Please.
This is a great thing. If this podcast doesn't tell you anything, it's that persistence overcomes resistance, right? And also that networking is essential. It's key. I've been friends with these cats for lots and lots of years, and we all benefit from each other's knowledge and friendship. And I found this quote, and I put it on my Facebook, and I think I'll end with this tonight. You can see that. It says, surround yourself with people who would mention your name in a room full of opportunities. Think about that.
Word.
So, all right. I guess if I
you have any other last questions, come on.
Well, how about our sign offs? Tell people where they can find you online and how they can support you.
All right, cool.
Jamar,
Mike. Okay.
It's all about you tonight. It's all about you.
It's the Jamar show. Thank you. Thanks, D. Brad. You can find me on Instagram. I had to restart my account. So now I'm still salty about that. So you can find me at Jamar_Nicholas_cartoonist. I've been posting a lot of really cool images of cartoonists.
Yeah, old timey guys with hats. You need to get a fedora now. You need to get an old fedora.
I put up there Antonio Proheus today, the Spy versus Spy artist. And I think it's cool because a lot of people probably never seen these humans in real life.
They don't even know who he is because there's no Mad Magazine anymore.
Also, I put Charles Addams up there because a lot of people don't know the Addams family is a comic strip.
Right.
He looks like a G-Man with his get up there.
Yeah, man. Yeah, see. So yeah, and also I'm on Twitter at Jamar Nicholas with the blue check. And Yeah, look for me in
You
your
always
local
tell, 'cause there's a little drawing of you.
Oh yeah, it's like this.
Yeah.
But that's where you can find me. Steve, where we find you at?
I am Steve Conley. My webcomic is called The Middle Age. It's available at middleagecomic.com, and you can read it at Webtoon and Tapas and Go Comics, and again at middleagecomic.com. And right now, I just started today, and it runs until the beginning of June, like the first week of June, a special offer on my Patreon page where if anyone signs up at the $5 level or above, you get 13 books of mine. So
What?
it's kind of like my own little
Humble
bundle. Yeah, my own little summer bundle of books. So if you sign up at, I got a link here somewhere. Oh, someone's got it.
Yeah,
Oh, that's fantastic. Thanks.
Yeah, bro. I got you. Don't worry
So
about
if you check out the doobly doo below, that's me. And yeah, you guys are awesome.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael.
You can find me on Instagram at Draw Manly. You can find me on Twitter, I guess it's Draw Manly. You can find me on Facebook as Mike Manley. You can follow the adventures of the Phantom every day on Comics Kingdom, or on the was it the Seattle Examiner or whatever has a website that carries, I think, all the strips. You can also catch Judge Parker on there. I still have my old blog that's up, drawman.blogspot.com, that has just tons and tons and tons and tons of references and links and art and everything.
It's a fantastic blog. It really is.
I don't update it that much anymore because it seems like the world has kind of moved on from people wanting to read blogs, which I kind of miss because, there are a lot of really great blogs that you could really dig deep into. There were people who were like really passionate about different artists or different subjects, and they would like post all this stuff,
Good news, Mike. Start a newsletter and repurpose all that old content, and you can double dip.
That's why you get paid the big bucks, Steve Conley.
Okay. I will hire a robot to do that.
I love it. All right, guys. Thanks so much. Yeah, we're going to put a pin in this. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. We'll be back here next week with another guest. Keep your eyes peeled, and please like, subscribe, drop kick the alarm so you can keep up to date with what we're doing on our YouTube channel. And I'll also be back here tomorrow with a coffee break with JN. So for Mike, Steve, I'm Jamar, and we're still in a pandemic, so don't forget, wash those Kirby hands. See you next week.